Hey there everyone, it's Trisha with Easy Emini Trade, and I've been getting a lot of emails lately from people just mainly focusing on setups and not in the areas that they're taking the setups. So for example, like if you're taking a buy and you have a resistance area right above your head, doesn't make much sense to try to take a buy in an area where price has been struggling to get through. Wouldn't it be easier to let it trade through the resistance and then wait for it to pull back and then try to buy it? So I'm going to just do a few videos this week. I'll do them in small little increments, giving you some information that will hopefully help you pick better areas for taking your trades. And then maybe next week I'll do a webinar or something on it, implementing it. But we'll talk more about that. I'll see what my schedule will allow. But for now, let's get started, and I'll show you basically how I go about setting my support resistance. So I'll just bring up the NQ. It doesn't really matter. You're going to do the same thing no matter what instrument that you're trading. And I just have a stochastic on here in volume. You don't need to have anything else on there unless you want it. And then I just slapped a 5-period moving average on here. I don't do anything with that. I don't take trades off of it. I just thought that I would put that on there since a lot of people tend to use that on the daily. And then I have a 100-period EMA, and this is a 200-period EMA here. I'll just get rid of that. That's just a round number area. And then I have super trend on here with the same settings that we use for the Slinky setup. But again, not anything really too much to worry about. You can take trades off the daily, but obviously you're going to have to use a large stop. So what I do, I don't trade off the daily. I trade off a small little chart. And what I do is I will start out looking at the daily, picking out major areas of support and resistance. So what I start out doing is I'll start out with like marking an area where you have a tail that kind of popped in out of nowhere. So here's a tail here, right? And so you can see if I mark under this tail of this bar right here, it falls in line with an area of support from back here, which was when Monday the 4th of June, and then also with the general area of the close here from Friday the 1st. So the thing to remember about support and resistance is that they are just areas. They are not to the exact price. They're just a ballpark area. So you can see looking here, and this is at 71.01 and a quarter. So we already know, people that trade with me already know that we'll be watching that area because of a round number at 7,100. So what I do is I mark the major areas on the daily, and then I fine tune them on the 15-minute. So looking at this on the daily, the next area that I would probably mark, so I'm just looking for common areas. I don't care if it's includes a tail, doesn't include a tail, or if it's the high, the low, open, close. I'm just looking for a common area. So to me, this looks like a common area. We have the low of this bar here from Thursday. We have the general area of the high of this bar right here. It tried to get through that area and failed, right? Because it did not close above it. Then we have the general area of the high of this bar. We have the open of this bar, the close of this bar. So that's an area. And so that's at 72.05. So you can see right now we're trading above that. If you look at Friday, and if I just mark the area of the close from Friday, is actually 77, but you can see that we're hanging right in that general vicinity right now. And then if I were to mark another area, again looking at the low from Friday, we have the open on this bar, the high of this bar, the open on this bar, the close on this bar. So we have lots of common areas. So what this is telling us, we started out down here this morning, we pushed lower, and now we've been pushing higher. So as we were trading up, if you look at a smaller chart, you see that we struggled around the 40-50 area, and obviously now we're struggling right around the 79 area. We're actually under that at 72 and a quarter. So if we were to trade higher, we've got Friday's open and Thursday's close all right there. So that would be at 1075. So this is on the daily, as I mentioned. So now what I want to do is I want to fine tune this on a 15-minute chart. So here's a 15. On here I have a 5, a 15, and a 30 just for explanation purposes. Generally what I do is after I look at the daily, I'll look at a 15 and I'll mark areas of support and resistance. And you'll find that they're going to fall in the same areas on all these same charts, but obviously on a 5-minute you have more noise than the 15, and on a 15 you have more noise than the 30, and on the 30 you have more noise than the 60, etc., etc. So opening up the 15-minute here, I do have volume at price indicator on here. And so what this is telling us is the area based on what I'm looking at right now on my screen. So all the bars that are on my screen now, this is telling me where the majority of the volume was. So this is today, this is part of Friday. So if I scrunch it up a little bit, I can get all of Friday in there as well. And anywhere that you see that there is a big blob of volume like this is basically telling you that there was a whole lot of time spent there generally. So if I were to draw a support resistance line right where I've got the highest concentration of volume right there, that's going to be at 71.50, right? And if I look at the lower end here and the upper end before we get an opening, by opening I mean like right here you can see these little gaps between the each price level. So if I mark this area here where we've got the upper end of the blob of volume and down here at the lower end where we have the blob of volume, if you look at the price bars here this morning, you could see that they generally are falling in areas that have created some support and resistance. And like I said, you can fine tune them, but you could see right here at the 67.75 area, this holding as support, this holding as support, like basically tried to get through and came back and closed above it. Same thing here, except it tried to pop higher and came back down and actually closed below it. This is where it opened, popped, came back, closed down here. So what we're looking to do is we're trying to fine tune the areas that price is likely to hesitate. So looking at this, I would probably move my resistance line up to this area here where I have the open and close of this bar and the high of this bar, and that's going to be around the 77 spot. And if you recall, 77 is where we actually closed yesterday, on Friday on the NQ. You could see right now we're holding the support area of 67.75. And so the longer amount of time that's spent in an area, the harder it's going to be to get through. So if you look at the daily and you look to the left of price and all you see are price bars, then you're going to really want to drill down on the 15-minute chart and pick out the areas that are struggling, where's price holding. So then what I would do is I'd probably mark this tail here just because it's there, but you could see looking over here at our volume composite here, we don't really have a whole lot of volume built up in there. So what this is telling us is that if price gets down here again, provided there's no other support resistance, then this could have an easier time dropping to the next strong area of support, which would be looking here, and here would be, approximately right here. We have this next, let me just show you, this next high blob of volume right here. It's kind of all by itself. When you have openings in the volume at price indicator, generally what will happen, and obviously it's going to depend on how much momentum there is. If you're trading when there's no volume, then it's irrelevant. But basically when you have an area where price breaks from one high volume area, it'll be generally sucked down to the next high volume area. So you can see right here, we have a little buildup of volume there. And if you look right here, we have a little buildup of volume here. So here being 67.75, 64, 60, 55, 50. And looking over here, we can fine tune that a bit. And these are all relevant areas. You can see price reacting at all of them. So how that's going to help you is if you're taking a trade you can have these lines that you just drew show up on your entry chart. So I'm just going to make this a 1 minute chart. I don't trade off a 1 minute, but let's just make it one for the sake of explanation. So I'm going to have these lines that I just drew on the 15 appear on the 1 minute. So this is Sierra. You could do the same thing in Ninja. So what I want to do is I want to copy the drawings from this chart number 1 onto this chart number 5. So I open the chart settings up on this chart number 5. I'm going to just put 1 in there because I want to copy the lines that I just drew from chart number 1 onto this chart number 5. And there they are. And if you open that up, so let's say that you were somebody who traded off a 1 minute chart and you see that you're coming down to support or up to resistance. If you have an area of resistance and you wanted to take a short off of it, like for example, right here, you could see we're trading up to resistance, that line that we drew at 64. Here you could see 64 again trying to pop through. What I like to do is I like to use a stochastic to spot divergence. So if price doesn't have a strong trending move and now, like now it's basically going sideways, I can short resistance and buy support. If the market takes off without me and I'm not in, so let's say the market moves higher and I'm not in, I can let the market run away and then just look for a pullback to one of these areas that we just marked as support. Or if the market tanks and we don't happen to be in, then we can let it tank and look for a retracement back to one of the areas of support we drew. So this is going to be part 1. I'll do part 2 tomorrow and we'll get a little bit more in depth with the areas that you might want to put on your chart in addition to support resistance. One thing that I did want to point out is the area that we were watching on the daily. Let me just move this over here. So we have these support resistance lines that we drew on the daily here, and you can compare them with the fine-tuned lines of support and resistance that you just drew on your 15. You have to remember that the bigger the chart, the less support resistance lines that you're going to draw. So like you wouldn't likely look at a 5 minute chart and draw support resistance for the whole entire day because it would be confusing. You'd wind up probably having more support resistance areas than you intended. But if you have an area that winds up becoming strong support or resistance intraday while you're trading, then mark it. A lot of times I'll mark swing highs and swing lows just so I have an idea of where price got stuck the last time around. But if you compare these, I've got off the daily here 72, 79 drawn, and we've got the 77 here. So we're in the same general vicinity. I have 72, 40, 50 area off the daily here, and I didn't draw one here on the 15, but let's just see. We can see down here we have this big high volume node right here, right smack dab in the middle. Let me just move that so you can see. Right here, right there. And that falls in line with that area on the daily of 40, 50. Now, keep in mind, if you look at this spot right here, we got a blob starting at, let's just say 43.50 down to 36.75. So what this is telling us is if we wind up back in this vicinity again, we're probably going to struggle in this area until we can break through this high volume area of 35.75. Doesn't mean you can't take trades. It just means that if you're sitting there taking a trade, let's say around 40, and you're waiting for a runner, you have to at least be aware that you might struggle at the 35.75. And if you look over here to the left, pre-market, holding as support, tried to get through on the upside, couldn't, holding. And granted, this is pre-market, but to me it's still relevant. And then you can see it's still holding here, did manage to break down pre-market. And then on the open at 9:30, traded right back to that area until it broke out here. All right, so like I said, this is going to be part 1, and I will give you more information. So I would urge everybody to practice. There's no right or wrong answer for drawing support or resistance. And if you find that you have lots of lines of support and resistance that you're drawing in one specific area, what that's telling you is there is a lot of congestion in that area, and just be wise about the trades that you take, in especially waiting for a runner, turning a winning trade into a losing trade because you're expecting it to take off. Okay, so I will follow up tomorrow with part 2.